And I am an Education and Program Specialist at the Gilcrease Museum, and it is a warm June day, and it's the perfect time for me to talk to you about a celebration that happens here in America called Juneteenth. Now, we celebrate Juneteenth on June 19th, and it is the celebration of the end of slavery. And today I want to talk to you about some items that we have in the Gilcrease collection that were made by African American artists. Quilting is a technique that people use to make quilts to keep their families warm, but quilts are also made to preserve family memories and history. And you see these in African American quilts where they quilt about their family and African American history. The Gilcrease Museum has 5 identified quilts from African American artists, and this year when we did the exhibition Memories and Inspiration, you could also see the painting by Cedric Huckabee that's titled She Wore Her Family's Quilts. So we see how important quilting and the quilting tradition is to the African American community. There's a center here in Tulsa called the Greenwood Cultural Center, and they called for a quilting bee. They had 69 volunteers come together to make a quilt that commemorated the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. Today we're going to learn a technique called needle turn applique, and we're going to learn how to make our own quilting square. So take a moment to think about what's important to your family, what are some family memories that you'd like to preserve, or what are some important aspects of your history that you would like to commemorate in a quilting square. We're going to gather our supplies. I'm going to teach you the technique so that way you can have a quilting square of your own. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to gather our supplies. So I have a piece of paper that I can draw a template on that I'm going to draw my fabric. I have a Sharpie to draw my design. I have a chalk pencil. You can also just use a regular piece of chalk if you want, but the reason why we're going to use a chalk pencil is because this is going to come off with water and it's not going to stay on our fabric. We also have a ruler to help us measure our square. We have scissors to cut our fabric and our paper. We have some sewing pins, and these are just pins that we're going to use to hold our design onto our base square. We also have a quilting needle. You can buy these in packs at somewhere like Walmart. They're just basic sewing needles. And then we also have some white all-purpose thread that we're going to be using today. And to make our quilting squares, I need 2 different pieces of fabric. Now you can use like a calico or a cotton that you have at your house if you have material, but if you don't, you can just use some old t-shirts. So I have 2 old t-shirts that I'm going to use for this project. And now that we have all of our supplies, we are ready to draw our design out and get to quilting. So as you can see here, I've used my ruler to measure out a 6-inch square, and I'm just going to use this as a template to draw it on my t-shirt. And then I've also drawn my design. Now you can do any design that you want. As we talked about earlier, African American quilts remember family history. They also remember African American history. And so I thought about this, and I thought about how I could apply it to my life. And family is so important to me, and so my last name actually starts with a C. So I am going to, for my first quilting square, I am going to needle turn applique a C onto my base. So we're going to cut out these templates. Now that we have our base square template, which is 6 inches by 6 inches, and I have the design that's going to go on my base square, we are ready to get out our fabric and trace them onto the fabric. Just to make things a little easier, I went ahead and cut out pieces from my t-shirts, and this is going to make it easier for me to work with for cutting out my design. So the first thing we need to cut out is our design, and for my design I'm going to be doing a C, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to place my design onto my t-shirt, I'm gonna use my chalk pencil. You can just use regular chalk if you have it. And I'm gonna trace around the C. Now that I have traced around the C, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in and I'm going to make another outline, a 1/4 inch outside. Now we're gonna sew right on this line that we made, and we're gonna turn under this piece of fabric. So go ahead and make another line, a 1/4 of an inch around your whole design. Now that I've gone around my whole design a 1/4 of an inch, I'm gonna go ahead and use my square template to cut out my base square. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna take a different color of chalk pencil. If you're just using white chalk, it'll show up on any color, but the chalk pencil I was using before on the blue is pink, so that way I can see it on this one. I'm gonna use the blue one. Now, all we have to do is cut out our base square, and we're also gonna cut out our design. Now remember, when we're cutting out our design, we're gonna cut on the outer line that we made that's a 1/4 of an inch away from our original design line. Now we have our base square, and then we also have our design that we are going to do needle turn applique onto. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to get our needle ready. The needle that we're going to be using is just a sewing or a quilting needle. You can buy these in large quantities at places like Walmart or Hobby Lobby, Joann's, any other kind of craft shop. And then we're also going to be using thread. Now you could also use like blue thread if you wanted it to match more, but this technique is also used so that you don't see the thread. So today we're just going to be using some white all-purpose thread. So I'm going to pull off 18 inches. On one side of my thread, I am going to tie a couple knots. And we do this because whenever we're pulling this thread up through the fabric, if we didn't tie a knot, the thread would just pull through the fabric and it wouldn't stop. But we're trying to sew this down, so we need to have a thread. We need to have a knot in the thread to stop it. So I'm gonna tie about 4 little knots right on top of each other, so it makes one big knot. I'm going to clip off the extra. And then I am going to take the other side of my thread, and I'm going to thread it through the eye of my needle. Now, if the thread won't push through, you can just cut it at a sharper point until we can get it to go through that. And I'm gonna pull out about 6 inches, and this is gonna be my tail. It's just gonna kind of hang out there. So we have a knot on one end, and we have a 6-inch tail on the other end. So when we are doing needle turn applique, we're actually gonna be using our needle to turn under this piece of fabric right here. And whenever we're starting this, we do want to start on a straight edge. So I'm gonna start on the straight edge. And if ever you're going on a curve, you're gonna need to do a couple more snips to make sure that the fabric lays down. So I'll show you how to do that when we get here. But what we're gonna do is, we're going to take our needle, And at that flat edge, we're gonna use it to turn under our work. Now, from the back side of our work, we're gonna come up right there where our line is. We're gonna pull our thread all the way through. So you can see our threads coming out right there. So you can see our threads coming out right there. Now, we're gonna make a little stitch. So we're gonna go in right on our line, and we're not gonna push our needle all the way through. We're gonna push it through about 1/8 of an inch and then push it back out. So we've grabbed a little piece of our blue piece of fabric, and we're gonna pull our thread all the way through. Now, in order to secure it to our base square, we're gonna do the same stitch down here. So I'm gonna go into my orange, but not pull all my thread through, and you can see I'm pulling my needle back out. So we're just gonna make a little stitch right there. Now, we don't wanna pull it too tight where it's gonna scrunch the fabric, just tight enough where we take all the slack out. Now, we're gonna do the same thing, grab a piece of the blue, grab some of the orange, grab the blue until we get to the corner, and then I'll show you how to turn it. Now, as you can see, we've appliqued this edge on. You can see that we can't see any of our stitches, and that's why needle turn applique is really nice, because you're not gonna see any of those stitches. So now that we're at the corner, I'm gonna show you how to turn this, and I'm also gonna show you how to do stitches around a curved edge. So, to turn this, all we're gonna do is we are going to use our needle to tuck in this piece, and if it won't tuck in, all we're gonna do is we're gonna take our scissors and we are going to very carefully make a little cut right there. And you can also use your finger if it's easier than using the needle, but we're gonna turn that down. So I just did a stitch on the blue, so I'm gonna do a small little stitch through my pink base just to secure it down. And now I'm gonna go around that corner and I'm gonna do another stitch in my blue. So remember, we put our needle in, we push it through, so we've grabbed a little bit of that blue, and then we're gonna pull our needle all the way through, and after we have stitched into the blue, we're gonna stitch into the orange. So I'm gonna take my needle and I'm gonna turn this in, but as you can see, we're starting to go around a curve and it's not gonna turn under perfectly. So what I'm gonna do is on this curve, I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna make some small cuts, and I'm only making cuts to my line, so 1/4 of an inch in. And I'm just gonna make some cuts all around this curve so that way my fabric will turn under. So now that we've made our cuts, we can turn these pieces of fabric in easier. We're gonna take our needle, we're gonna turn under that fabric. Again, if it's a little difficult, you can use your fingers. Okay, so we've just gone through the blue, so we need to go down into the orange and up, a little bit down. We're gonna pull our string all the way through, and then we're gonna make another stitch into our blue. Go into the blue, and then out. We've just grabbed a little piece of it, and now we've tacked that down. Now we're ready to push our next piece under. I'm gonna use our needle and just tuck that little piece away. And we just did our blue stitch, so now we're gonna do our orange stitch. Grab a little piece of
the orange or light pink, whichever color you want to call it. And then we're going to go back into our blue. I'm going to grab a little piece of the blue, come out the other side, pull our stitch tight. We're going to go down into our orange or light pink. We're going to grab a stitch, and you're going to continue doing this all the way around your design. So you can see this is that 1/4 inch edge that we've cut, and we're just tucking a little bit underneath, and we're using this to applique it down. You can see that we can't see our stitch here, and that's what makes 2-needle applique so great. So draw out your designs, cut out all your supplies. If you need to, you can use these pins to go around and pin this design down, especially if you have a smaller design, but just use to hold it. Mine was a pretty big design and it was easy to work with, but if you need the pins, go ahead and use them. We would love to see your designs and the quilting squares that you create.